Daily Devotionals with open hearts and open minds. First United Methodist Church in Pueblo, Colorado presents Hope and Coffee with Pastor Hugo Venegas.
Hi. When you were in the first grade, do you remember your first day back in grade school? Your first day in first grade? I remember my first day. I got the green Vaseline in my hair. I remember getting dressed up. I remember the smell of my book bag when I went to school, and the Mercedes Benz of my neighbor who drove up to in front of my house, and I got in and took me to the private Catholic school in Limon, Costa Rica. But I can't remember who was the first person that I greeted or that I spoke to because I was very nervous. I did not have the confidence to go and talk to someone. And we're studying the work of the Spirit and empowering believers to preach the good news, to go out and share and have conversations about the gospel. And we're looking at 1 Peter and chapter 3, verse 19, where it says that it is through the Spirit, all right? It is through the Spirit who allows Jesus to go and preach to the spirits in prison. Now, we're looking back at chapter 4 in Luke when we see that the Spirit of God came upon Jesus and he began to preach the good news. And in verse 18 it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor." Who did Jesus go to first to preach? It was the poor. He went to the poor. And I think that if he were here today, the first people that he would take care of in sharing the good news of the gospel would be the poor. And it's very difficult for us to take the poor into consideration. The poor are always ostracized. The poor are always left behind. The poor are always forgotten by our government, by our corporations. And especially in the COVID-19 situation, poor people are really hurting. I want you to know that in Singapore was one of the first countries that had a control over the virus. They tested everyone. Whoever tested positive, they quarantined them. They did contact tracing, finding who was associated with this positive member, and then they quarantined them. They did not shut the whole country down. They practiced social distancing, but they tested, they did tracing, and they quarantined people, and they stopped the virus. But did you know who they forgot to take care of in Singapore? The poor migrant workers. The poor migrant workers did not get any attention from the government. And if you read what's happening right now in Singapore, a lot of the people that are getting sick were those migrant workers that live in small quarters, that live in bunched up in apartments. And once one got sick, it started spreading like wildfire. And now the disease is going out in the wider population, and it's infecting the rich, it's infecting all the middle class, and it's infecting everyone. Why? Because they did not take care of the poor. Had they gone to the poor, they would be probably right now propping their economy up like crazy, but they disregarded the poor. That's why Jesus, when he started his ministry, went to preach to the poor. He realized that it's very easy for people to disregard the poor. It is very easy for us to ignore the poor. In fact, one of the reasons why I feel so proud of being a part of the United Methodist movement is the Methodists, the original Methodists, the Charles brothers. They went to preach during the Industrial Revolution to places where normal preachers and priests would not go. They went to the mine factories. They went out to the open fields. They went out to the poor people. And they were always committed to preaching the gospel to the poor. That's part of our DNA as Methodists, that we go where no one wants to go to preach the gospel. But today we have lost that fire. Today we have lost that engagement in going to the poor. Who would the early Methodists go to? They would go, let's go to the farm workers. Let's go to the meat packing workers. They don't have any insurance. The companies are not taking care of them. They're dying of this virus. Let's go in the spirit of Christ to preach to the poor. It is a challenge today. It is a challenge in the past, and it will be a challenge in the future for us to ignore the poor. But that was not the heart of Jesus. Who did you talk to? The first person that you talked to when you were in first grade? I don't remember. But I know that God remembers the poor, and that God remembers those who are vulnerable, and that God remembers those who are ostracized. And we need the Spirit of God to go to those places where no preacher wants to go and share the good news of the gospel. If there are poor people around, if there are people struggling, if there is a lady who can't pay her bills, can you go and be good news to her? Can you go and encourage her based on the Spirit of God working in your life? This is Hugo Venegas from Pueblo, Colorado. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for our daily devotional, Hope and Coffee, with Pastor Hugo Venegas. If you enjoyed today's devotion, like or subscribe below. We also welcome you to join our family at First United Methodist Church in Pueblo, Colorado. You can visit our website at firstumcpueblo.org, and we hope you continue to have a blessed day. We'll see you tomorrow.